Silberberg is here, the amazing author of the book called, I forget now, but it's Bots Against Us.
Bots Against Us.
What a great book that is. And you also have a startup in the cybersecurity world, which is called?
It's DigiJaks Group.
And on the other side of the screen here is Chris Vickery, who we've met before on the show, very well known for finding all sorts of leaks and hacks and malware around the world. And Chris also works for a company. I'm asking you to say the names because I can't find my script here. So what's the name of the company you work for?
UpGuard.
UpGuard, okay. Over the last few days, we've had the discovery, at least, or the public announcement of what has been a remarkably serious hack that has affected, it seems like, at least 5 or maybe as many as 7 government agencies. We're talking about everything from the 5 departments within the Pentagon, the NSA, the White House, the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Justice. This is not some run-of-the-mill sort of hack. It's been pretty broad, and it's been going on for months, by all accounts. And so, Chris, let's start with you. What's your assessment? How big a deal is this?
Well, I think it's very important and critical for everyone to keep in mind that this is the early days of this being reported, and it's still being investigated, and things that involve data breaches and actual malicious hacking. The story always evolves. It changes. Things come out. People kind of rush real fast to get on the story, and companies try to contain the PR damage from it. So take everything with a little bit of a grain of salt. The elements of what we know right now is that there was a data incident, a security intrusion of sorts with a company called SolarWinds, who has kind of a role at the top of an umbrella as far as the service model goes. And there are thousands and thousands and thousands of customer companies below that umbrella that are affected by this security incident. Because there are government agencies that are known to be clients of SolarWinds, there are obvious concerns for things of a national security and defensive purposes level. I wouldn't necessarily say that this is unique or something that is unusual in and of itself. It is unusual that it's being talked about, but this kind of level of cascading supply chain concern, it's an ever-present issue, and we're likely to hear of a lot of these types of very large, high-level breaches as the future marches on.
Right. So it's a company that I've never heard of, but I'm sure many people have it, come into contact with it. So the broad impact of this, Alan, is it impacting people at home now? Are they feeling it as they log onto their favorite websites or services right now, or is this something strictly for businesses that they're dealing with, or government agencies?
Well, that's actually a very good question. I mean, most of the end users are going to be government or companies or other organizations. However, having said that, each of those has their own little ecosystem of users. So it really depends on the deployment and what they're using it for and how. So some companies, it might definitely affect their external relationships with either third-party users or even their customer base. With government agencies, we won't see a government website turned off or something. However, the government did issue an alert for the first time in a long time, for basically government-wide alert to any agency using both the software Orion and the SolarWinds, and basically to disconnect them immediately, to take those devices offline to fix it. But I think what Chris said is very important. This is very early in this. And it seems like this is a fairly sophisticated attack that has been going on for several months. And so when they're announcing right now, we believe as far back as March, often when these things progress, you might find out they were actually lurking around there since January, but they didn't really execute until March, and so here we are. Having said that, I think that there's also the Microsoft 365 piece of this, which SolarWinds and Orion are really integrally related to it. I'm trying not to get too techie here, but that definitely opens the door to other devices, other IoT situations, and maybe a larger set of effects down the road, especially if companies have downloaded this patch that was corrupt and then don't fix it, or they don't fix it in time.
So the prime suspect right now is Russia, or at least the Russian intelligence agency. Chris, do we know who that is, and do we know why they're so certain it is Russia?
The word that I've seen in several fairly confident publications is that it is related to Russian intelligence and all of that whole mess. One of the first reactions I had, though, was this is very coincidental timing as far as when this is being reported and found. And it really seems to me that we should consider it's likely that if this is what's being suggested, that it is a foreign hostile entity hacking into U.S. government, whatever the heck, it's very coincidental and a useful cover story to kind of make it all blow up into a big finale right now. And that creates a haze cloud and plausible deniability for whenever the actual origin was. If people get this date and time right now stuck in their head as when it all went down, it makes it harder to point out what may end up being the truth. And that it may be that perhaps there was somebody that opened a gate maybe a year or 2 or 3 ago, and it's been a constant exfiltration ever since then. But now when people are investigating that, it's going to look like, oh, that was just that thing at the very end that blew up. So
you're saying it could be like an inside job?
What I'm saying is the cloud-ish type platforms that manage all these services for thousands and thousands of infrastructure deployments, they have a lot of contractors and a lot of employees, and it's not possible to operate them in a way that is up to snuff. I would be very careful about calling it an inside job. That has a lot of
connotations,
connotations, a lot of baggage to it. It doesn't have to be an insider necessarily. Right now, there's a lot of people working in remote locations that wouldn't normally be working in remote locations. Maybe somebody's kid at their house downloaded an app, and it infected their router at home with some sort of monitoring key exfiltration malware. Who knows? And they happen to be an employee at SolarWinds. Who knows? There's a million different scenarios. But what we know is that the first little trickling in of potential here, at least as far as what SolarWinds has claimed to the SEC in their filings about this, is that there was an email compromise of SolarWinds email host. From there, the opening, it's Pandora's box at that point. If you have systems administrators of a company and their email is compromised, and they've been doing anything like sending passwords through their email or receiving emails from clients that are saying, hey, I tried my password, which is XYZ, and it's not working. Can you help me? If that's still there and those emails get seen, and people have hundreds of thousands of emails potentially sitting in there waiting to be plucked out and read through, there's no telling how far it could go. It's a real problem.
The actual malware was contained in an update, a fake update, right? That was sent out, and then they surreptitiously downloaded this.
And that's the red herring element that I'm getting at. If you have sufficient access to upload a Trojan patch or insert it's into the .dll files that people can patch or update their stuff with that are clients of SolarWinds. If you have enough access to Trojan that file and serve it up to thousands of customers, there are other things you can do as well. It's not like somebody managed to submit a random post to a bucket and all of a sudden it got overwritten in a patching process. No, somebody got through to the system that allowed them to create this file in the place that they put it in. And we need to have a wider view of the scenario.
That's a pretty sophisticated operation. Alan, so you were in the middle of backing him up on some of his theories.
I was trying to back up exactly what he was saying. I want to add something very specific, though. So in the release that SolarWinds put out, they use, here's the terminology that they use specifically. So I'm quoting, the security breach was likely the result of a highly sophisticated, targeted, and manual supply chain attack by an outside nation state. Now, the word manual in this definition is actually not usually seen that often when you look at breach reports. Often it's really highly technical, blah, blah, blah. When you see manual, it's exactly what Chris was saying. It's raising the question of like, well, is this human error? Is this human doing something on purpose for a bad faith, or maybe some sort of combination? They're clearly leaving that door open right now. They are not shutting that door. They're not saying, this was just a direct thing. However, the sophistication of what went on here, it leads to a second question. When you have this kind of public chaotic hack like this, and there's a whole bunch of noise going on, and there's a whole lot of attention, like Chris said, on a specific date or a specific company or a specific style of attack or breach, oftentimes that is also hiding a secondary attack or a secondary breach that's still ongoing, that hasn't been caught, and they're basically kind of trying to redirect the public's attention to this other thing. Hey, go look over here at this shiny thing here. So my question is, how many more of these are still kind of lurking around the government right now, and or other systems? They may not just be SolarWinds and Orion. It might be other third-party operators that Microsoft uses through the 365 ecosystem. It could be a lot of things. And I think that one of the questions that I have from this is, okay, whether or not we authenticate that it's Russia behind this, I'm pretty sure, given the footprints and the pattern, it seems very similar to the attack on the White House and State Department in a few years ago. It seems very similar to the attack on the DNC and the exfiltration of email records. But with the DNC situation, they sat and lurked in their systems for months, and it was only until an outside vendor found that there was a problem. And that also is true with the OPM hack several years ago as well, which most people have attributed to China. But this also, never been proven that it was China. It could easily have been Russia, or both, China and Russia combined, which is unusual, but it does happen. And I think that the pattern that you look at when you see these things, that's what I believe is very difficult to mimic at scale. It's easy to mimic for one hacker to mimic another hacker's kind of approach and systems. But when you have something that's this complicated, and someone put a lot of money into the techniques and the technology used to create this hack, and also they had to practice it a few times. There's no way they just put this out into the public domain and hope that it was going to work. So they probably were sandboxing this, and they were like, let's really perfect this so that we can hide it and embed it, and then play with to basically extract as much information from this trusted environment, because you're putting something into a trusted environment, that's whether it's government or business, whatever, because they purchased this software from, whether it's SolarWinds or any other company. Basically what happened is, I hand my money over to you because I'm trusting that you're going to take my data and my privacy seriously. So if you have something that's hidden in an update or hidden in some sort of controller device that most people just simply aren't going to be looking at, it really makes it, I think, a level of vulnerability much greater, even if they didn't necessarily extract top secret documents.
Now, the suspicious mind in me says, here's Donald Trump allowing the Russians in somehow to do one last snatch and grab of everything they want from the various agencies, and maybe even cover some tracks, and that's the real reason this is happening. That this is something that's been tacitly maybe approved of by the White House. Obviously, there's no evidence of that, but that's when I go there, that's where my suspicious mind likes to lead me. What do you guys think of that?
I see this very, very differently than the narrative that's being generally passed around and that people naturally would assume. There's no way that there's a sophisticated actor necessary for this, what's been described here. All that is necessary is somebody left a password somewhere they shouldn't have, and another person got into their email and used a password to upload to a distribution point. This isn't like super sophisticated stuff. It could very well have been done by a state actor. It probably even was. But you got to think bigger picture here. The important like secret level documents and emails and communications and all, that stuff's been plugged for a few years, most likely, because there's so many holes in the armor already, and there is no way in hell that they would wait until the last few days of an administration to suddenly pop it. No, this didn't cost a lot of money. This didn't take a whole lot of time and effort. The necessary access credentials and bribable people are aplenty in this industry of contractors and remote workers and hosting thousands and thousands of infrastructures.
The reporting is pretty clear, though, that they were spying on people's emails. I mean, that it was Russian hackers doing it. So my assumption is that there was an effort to monitor what people were communicating in those emails. It's not just, hey, we left the gate open and stumbled upon those emails.
I mean, I think often you have a situation where, one hacking group is trying to make it look like another hacking group is doing it. I mean, you see this in corporate thefts all the time, especially just, with this straight up the ransomware stuff. And there's a lot of, the Chinese trying to make it look like it's the North Koreans, and the Iranians trying to make it look like it's Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia trying to make it look like it's Russia, and Russia trying to make it look like it's everybody. So yeah, there's definitely an element to that.
Right. And that plays directly into what I'm getting at here, and that is you do a big flashy thing right now and cause some fuzziness in the attribution, and now for the past 2 to 3 years, anything that's ever been exfiltrated from any of those government entities, people are going to point at and say, hey, we need to investigate that. Oh, that was just part of that SolarWinds thing at the very end. Right. It's no big deal. We attributed that. And then when they get into the weeds on that, you'll have all the bickering arguments of whether or not it really was Russia. But in the end, it probably doesn't really matter. And we need to look bigger and zoom out and think about it a little bit harder before just accepting the natural narrative here.
And when you zoom out.
I agree with that. I think that's an important point. But I will also say that because of the patterns here, if it wasn't the Russians, okay, and given that whoever did this started from what we know of, March, they've had the continuity to go through the pandemic, the work from home situation, all that without any change. So whoever it is, if it's not the Russians, it's someone, and then they may not have spent a lot of money specifically. However, there's definitely a lot of time and logistics that go into whatever you describe. So whether it's taking a password, bribing someone, or as we've heard it being called an actual hack, those things take time and planning. To do it on a scale like this, I think, is partly shared because SolarWinds is really powered through the 365 environment and the whole. So I think if you didn't have that, if it was just like a standalone software company that happened to get whatever happened, hacked or bribed or whatever, that's one thing. But because it's like in this larger ecosystem that's instantly shared and instantly communicable between devices, that's where I think we see a risk. And I think the other risk that maybe is being a little bit under spoken of right now is, first of all, what else is it hiding? What other hacks are still ongoing that maybe this is like cover for, as Chris said? The timing of it's very interesting. It could be a political statement, Zev. It could also be, kind of the last gift to Putin. Trump has been acting as roughly an agent for Russia for several years, and I think that this would fall into his previous behavior over the years. But I also think that there's the larger picture to me is how vulnerable all these systems are, whether it's SolarWinds and Orion or Microsoft 365, or whether it's, a Linux setup or whatever, or Apple ecosystems. We're also reliant on these our lives have become digital ones and zeros. It used to be that our lives are digital ones and zeros like 15 hours a day. And now it's 24 hours a day because it's all we do. We live at home, we're working from home, we're on computers, our phones, tablets, nonstop. and the idea of privacy has disappeared mostly. And so in a shared situation, you have to compound the problem, any problem you have, by the sheer number of devices you have or the sheer apps at play and the people, the users who are interacting with all that.
Do you guys think this is so broad range, the general hacking is so broad range, as you were suggesting, Chris? I think you were suggesting that there is just so much hacking going on. The system is so porous that focusing on just one thing like this is just somewhat is micro looking at the problem rather than looking at the much bigger problem, which is we're all compromised and the entire system is basically compromised.
And at a top level, yes, that hits the nail on the head. Mm. This is not something that is unique and rare. It just doesn't get talked about very often.
Right.
This type of thing is happening all the time, every day, at the highest levels of the agencies and government departments that we trust and corporations. And it is beyond time for people to start being honest about it, telling the truth, and for companies to start paying a price for the laws they violate. Mm.
We've been doing it to the Russians for just as long as, well, maybe not just as long, but for a very long time too. I mean, it's, I only know the Promise story, and I'm sure there's many other stories, but, when you think back about to the Promise software back in the 1980s, when the United States basically reverse engineered a cell to the KGB to sell them this Promise software, they were able to, they sold them the software, but the software had a back door that they could then spy into the KGB. Is this basically the same kind of thing where, they find a vulnerability, they sit there for a long time, they lurk for a long time, and they just sit and spy away at the vast American government?
I mean, obviously it's a two-way, it's a multi-way channel thing. I mean, hacking is going on all directions constantly. 24 hours a day, that's part of the landscape. Does that make it right? No, not necessarily. Does it make it acceptable that a large company that has a large security team and a large budget was allowed something like this to occur? I mean, this emanated from a private sector company. So let's start with that. This wasn't like, someone attacking the Treasury Department directly. It was through a thing. So there's a big difference between, North Korea or Iran or Saudi Arabia or Russia or China, hacking the Pentagon. And this is really almost a commercial hack in nature that then, cascaded out to all these other agencies.
So the Russians didn't insert the extra code of the malware into the update, or they did?
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
The vector that they used was a private company. It wasn't like they didn't use like the CIA or the Treasury Department as the locus point to launch their attacks. So that does make it a bit different. Our government is constantly under hack attempts, ransomware attempts, denial of service attacks, you name it. Every type of cyber attack possible is constantly going on all of our federal agencies and state agencies, local agencies as well. Most of them, as Chris said, don't talk about it. There's basically a kind of a code of silence. And also many private companies they don't want to make a breach notification because it ends up costing them a lot of money, whether it's in lawsuits or higher premiums or having to pay out losses or whatever. So many companies do their best, unfortunately, to not report. Or if they report, they do a minimal reporting that's 6 months later after the fact, and they've already kind of patched it and fixed it. Oh, by the way, we were breached. Then I think there should be a stronger sort of set of rules and also results. So if your company is breached and you have some sort of fiduciary or HIPAA responsibility and you're not notifying, there should be some, not just significant fines, but maybe like in how we alter business and maybe you shouldn't be allowed to do that moving forward if you can't do this basic thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that gets way too far into the idea of, these are malicious bad guy hackers that are causing all these problems. That's not it. You can't visit a website these days without 25 cookies being written to your device without your consent.
Right.
That is the very definition of hacking a victim that you have invited to the website, running code that puts data on their computer for your personal benefit, and that you plan to use the profits of to continue that campaign of illegal criminal behavior in the future. And every single website's doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to start at the basic level of a clear, bright line of cut it out, you guys. You need to cut this shit out.
They're not going to do that, right? That's their source of revenue.
Well, they will not want to, but if you make it clear that they will no longer be profitable if they continue doing this, companies will start listening.